Islamic countries that he relies on for economic support. The United States has a very delicate balancing act that they have to make sure what they do ask Pakistan to do does not essentially cause the conditions for a civil war, which certain people inside Pakistan would be happy to see happen because it would push them right over the edge into the Islamic revolution that they really want to have there.
On that note, we've got to wind it up from New York City. I want to thank all our guests, Mansour Ijaz of the Crescent Investment Management Firm, Patricia Chadwick of Ravengate Partners out in Los Angeles, Larry Elder of KABC Radio, and our two correspondents that helped us tonight, Major Garrett at the White House and Gary Tuchman. This has been CNN Hotline. I'm Jack Cafferty. Good night from New York City.
Almost 6 days since the tallest symbols of the financial capital of the world collapsed, the hunt intensifies for the terrorists responsible.
And through the night, rescue and recovery crews work in what's left of the World Trade Center, not giving up hope, not yet.
Meanwhile, anxious brokers around the world await the resumption of trade on the New York Stock Exchange. Hello, I'm Michael Holmes.
And I'm Colleen McEdwards at CNN Center. This is CNN's continuing coverage of America's new war.
Okay, let's first bring you up to date now on the latest developments in the investigation on Tuesday's attack. Sources tell us here at CNN that 2 new arrest warrants have been issued for material witnesses sought in connection with the attacks. No details made public as yet. 2 other people already in custody, of course, on material witness warrants. FBI agents have searched an apartment in Delray Beach, Florida. It is believed to have been the home of one suspected hijacker on board the United Airlines flight that crashed in Pennsylvania. Now, another hijacking suspect may have lived in the same complex. President George W. Bush will meet with his national security and economic teams on Monday morning as leaders in the United States continue discussions on how they will respond to the attacks. Mr. Bush is encouraging Americans, meanwhile, to be resilient, even as they mourn.
Tomorrow when you get back to work hard like you always have. But we've been warned. We've been warned there are evil people in this world. We've been warned so vividly. And we'll be alert. Your government is alert. The governors and mayors are alert that evil folks still lurk out there.
Aides to the president say he will focus his energies in 2 main directions this week, planning a response and encouraging Americans to return to normal lives.
Well, President Bush spoke with King Abdullah of Jordan and Mexican President Vicente Fox on Sunday. The calls to world leaders are part of his intensive efforts to muster up international support for any possible action. U.S. leaders acknowledge, though, that any fight against terrorism will be long and it will be complex.
The United States needs assistance from countries with intelligence information. We need assistance from countries to deny terrorists and terrorist networks the access to their real estate and their facilities. We need them to cooperate in a host of ways if this goal is going to be achieved. My guess is there will be a number of different coalitions that will be functioning over time. Some will be able to do some things, others will be able to do other things. And how that will work and how that will play out, I think it's hard to say at the moment. But the one thing you can be sure is it'll take a lot of time. It'll take years, not days.
A high-level Pakistani delegation is in Afghanistan carrying a message from the United States. Afghanistan's ruling Taliban has been giving support to Saudi dissident Osama bin Laden, named by U.S. officials as the prime suspect in the attacks, named by the president as well. The message gives the Taliban 72 hours to hand over bin Laden. Pakistan is one of only 3 countries that recognizes the Taliban as the government of Afghanistan and keeps relations with it. But the Pakistan government says it will fully back international efforts against terrorism.
we need to keep our focus where it really belongs, which is how to fight this menace to ensure also that there is security in the region where my country is situated. We are situated in a very volatile and dangerous part of the world. Obviously, we seek longer-term security and peace in our region. As I said, there is an immediate response, but we also have to look longer-term to see that we have an approach that deals with some of the underlying reasons which give rise to people who hold extremist views.
I want to take you back to New York City. Now the search for survivors continues there through the night, but no one has been found alive in the wreckage of the World Trade Center since Wednesday. New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani says the likelihood of finding survivors is fading, but rescue efforts are going to continue until all hope is gone.
The hope is still there that we might be able to save some lives, but the reality is that in the last several days we haven't found anyone.
Well, nearly 5,000 people still missing in New York and many survivors still facing a battle.
Just getting into work about 8:45. Getting out of the elevator, walking in the hallway. I was on 83rd floor of the first tower. All of a sudden, as I'm walking in the hallway, I hear a door explode and just this big ball of fire just engulfed me. I just froze. I didn't do anything. I just stood there.
And just to update you on the attack at the Pentagon, the identities of 2 of the victims there have now been confirmed. 186 other people are still missing and presumed dead. Michael?
Well, blocks away from the World Trade Center site, the New York Stock Exchange will resume trading in just over 7 hours from now. The exchange, of course, closed since Tuesday. Before the day's buying and selling begins, however, traders will hold 2 minutes of silence at the traditional opening time. That's 9:30 a.m. Then the singing of God Bless America. Well, day 6 of the investigation found U.S. authorities very busy in a number of locations. In San Diego, FBI agents have interviewed the operator of a flying club, where at least one of the suspected hijackers may have sought pilot training. The club turned Khalid Al-Midha and another man away because they couldn't speak English well enough to understand the lessons. Investigators say Al-Midha was on board the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. They have also linked him to the bombing of the USS Cole. With more now on the investigation, let's go to CNN's Mike Betcher.
The FBI was back at this apartment house in South Florida, taking away evidence. It's believed to be the residence of Saeed Al-Ghamdi, one of the suspected hijackers on United Flight 93. At least one other hijacker on the same flight may have lived in the same building. All over the country, leads are being pursued. 2 more arrests for material witnesses were issued. 2 people are already in custody. And in New Jersey, just across the river from New York, another apartment was searched. This one was the residence of one, possibly both men, picked up off an Amtrak train allegedly carrying cash, airline tickets, and box cutters. But the top of the most wanted list has not changed and will not, according to U.S. officials. But the effort to add suspect names after Osama bin Laden is accelerating both in the U.S. and internationally.
He headed it up and organized it, but it's a very broad, kind of loose coalition of groupings. It includes not only his forces, but it also includes, for example, Islamic Jihad from Egypt.
Members of Egyptian Islamic Jihad filled the top ranks of bin Laden's al-Qaeda organization. Islamic Jihad's leader, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, was at bin Laden's side during this 1998 press conference. Widely considered bin Laden's chief lieutenant, Zawahiri is also his personal doctor. Like bin Laden, he's believed to be in Afghanistan. Bin Laden denied he was responsible in a statement released Sunday through an Arabic-language satellite news channel. As for me, I have been living in the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and following its leader's rules, he said. The current leader does not allow me to exercise such operations.
He's a prime suspect, but we have to be realistic. This is not a person that's the problem. It is a whole host of people and a whole host of countries that are harboring those people.
The head U.S. officials are sure of, bin Laden, but hidden under the cloak of al-Qaeda's mastermind, a complex organization. harder to identify, and just as their leader, elusive. Mike Betcher, CNN, Atlanta.
Bye. And now we want to bring you more on the search and recovery effort in New York City. It's a little bit after 2 in the morning there. And joining us now from Lower Manhattan, CNN's Gary Tuchman. Gary, one thing that has been cooperating is the weather. It's a clear night there tonight.
It's been clear every night since this disaster happened, except for one night it rained very hard for 12 hours, but the search conditions have been very good. Unfortunately, the search itself hasn't been very successful. We are about to start a new work week, which makes us think a lot about the old work week that just passed. On Monday morning, when people woke up and drove to the World Trade Center, their biggest problem in most cases was crowded subways and crowded roadways. The same thing for Tuesday, but then all hell broke loose. And this is what we have right now as this new work week starts. The World Trade Center complex is gone. Instead, we have a flaming, smoky cauldron, which has become a temporary graveyard for up to 5,000 people right now. It is a very sad situation. The search continues, but no one has been found alive since early Wednesday morning, but they are still trying to find survivors. We want to show you pictures from above the scene. We haven't been able to show you such pictures because the airspace above the scene has been closed. We now have this video which shows you the void where the World Trade Center complex used to stand. You see the buildings surrounding it. Many of those buildings are damaged. Others could eventually be condemned. Now, earlier today, we talked with a policeman from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. This policeman was inside the North Tower of the World Trade Center when it collapsed. He was on the 4th floor. He was a canine officer. He lost his dog, but he survived.
Well, seeing there wasn't much, we were covering up the civilian Josephine Harris. We just on the ground, hearing it sounded like a rushing locomotive or an avalanche coming at us. And feeling, it was the feeling that I was going to die. You know, that's the only thing I could think at the time. And it went from I was going to die to no, I'm going to live and go home and see my family.
Wow. You were trapped for how long?
We were trapped for approximately 4 to 5 hours.
What did you do during that time before you were rescued?
Well, we radioed for help with using our walkie-talkies, the fire department and myself. And we would try to keep each other's spirits up, trying to get through on our cell phones to our families. And
did you make a connection?
We finally did. Yes.
Wow.
I got through to my wife, and I spoke to her. It was a personal conversation, of course. But then I told her that I would have to give the phone up to the other firemen, and it was only right that they had to call their families just in case, of course.
Up to 60 police officers are missing. Up to 300 firefighters are missing. Now, life will change for many people who survive this and have to go back to work. For example, the U.S. Secret Service. The U.S. Secret Service New York office was in the World Trade Center. Now they put a temporary office right across the street from where I'm standing now, 5 blocks away from the World Trade Center, in a Portuguese restaurant. Pino's Restaurant happens to be a 3.5-star Portuguese restaurant here in the Tribeca neighborhood of New York. It's closed down now because this neighborhood is closed off to the public. The U.S. Secret Service has taken the restaurant over, and right now that's where the Secret Service personnel are meeting, inside that restaurant. One other thing I want to mention, an extraordinary sight I saw yesterday, New York time, during the day on Sunday in the middle of the afternoon. Right in the middle of Central Park is an area called the Sheep Meadow. Sheep Meadow is as big as about 10 football fields. It's called the Sheep Meadow because in the early days of New York City, sheep used to wander around there, but now people go there to get suntans, to have picnics, to throw frisbees around. There are probably about 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 people in the Sheep Meadow today. When about 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern time, a fire truck came down the road next to the Sheep Meadow, and the fire truck had a huge American flag on top of it. I started to hear some clapping, and then before you knew it, everybody in the Sheep Meadow was applauding loudly, many of them giving standing ovations to the people in the fire truck. It was a sight and a sound that no one there will ever forget. Colleen, back to you.
Gary Tuchman, thanks so much for that. Appreciate it. Michael?
Okay. Efforts continue on the diplomatic front as well. On Sunday, top US leaders continued their work building a global coalition to conduct a campaign against the terrorists.
We will continue to work with Pakistan and India. We will work with Russia. We will work with the nations that one would have thought a couple of years ago would have been impossible to work with, to bring people to justice, but more than that, to win the war on against terrorist activity.
The key here to keep in mind is that what we're asking nations to do, and which the PACs have clearly made a decision to do, is we're asking nations to step up and be counted. They're going to have to decide. Are they going to stand with the United States and believe in freedom and democracy and civilization, or are they going to stand with the terrorists and the barbarians, if you will? And it's a fairly clear-cut choice, and I'm delighted to see that Pakistan has, in fact, stepped up to the task.
This is going to change the way we do business. It's going to change the way we go about our daily life here in the United States. It's going to require a greater emphasis on homeland defense so we can defend ourselves against those who, notwithstanding our best efforts overseas, are still trying to get in to the country to hurt us. And so we should see this as a long-term campaign and do apply decisive force to it. And that force isn't just military force. It's all the elements of national power that are at our disposal.
Well, you just heard the vice president there talking about Pakistan stepping up to the task here. Pakistan is urging Afghanistan's Taliban rulers to hand over Osama bin Laden. A delegation of senior Pakistani officials are meeting with Taliban officials in Afghanistan on Monday. And we spoke live with Pakistan's foreign minister just a short time ago. Let's listen.
The Pakistani delegation at a high level will be conveying to the Taliban government of Afghanistan the imperative of compliance with Security Council resolutions, both those that have been adopted in the past and the one that was adopted on the 12th of September. That is our own policy, and we hope that the government of Afghanistan will act with responsibility in the terribly grave situation raised by these horrendous terrorist attacks in New York and Washington.
And that Pakistani delegation would seem to have its work cut out for it in Kabul, because so far Afghanistan's Taliban have steadfastly refused to surrender bin Laden, some Pakistani officials even saying they don't expect it to happen. Michael?
Okay. Well, Major Garrett joining us now from Washington, where a long weekend is coming to a close. New tasks facing the Bush administration when Monday dawns. Major, I think you heard a lot of that interview from Pakistan. How do you think it's likely to be received there?
Well, of course, so much that was said in that interview has probably already been expressed to senior Bush administration officials in private. And the administration went out of its way, as it fanned out on the Sunday talk shows, to praise Pakistan for, as the vice president said, stepping up to the plate. You know, there's public diplomacy and there's private diplomacy, and the Pakistanis have been carrying both the private and the public on channels that can be watched across the world through CNN. Pakistani government made it clear on Sunday that among the things it is looking for the United States, if it in fact joins this broadening coalition as robustly as it has promised to, is help on removing economic sanctions imposed after Pakistan tested a nuclear device in 1998, aid for the country generally, and U.S. intervention, or at least increased U.S. intervention, in Pakistan's ongoing dispute with India over Kashmir. Privately, the Bush administration is saying, as far as the Kashmir dispute is concerned, they're not really eager to jump into that. But as to the question of economic sanctions and a broader aid package for Pakistan, privately they're not in any way suggesting that may in fact not occur. But overall, the Bush administration is only praising publicly Pakistan for getting involved, offering its good offices, sending this delegation to Afghanistan. There will be a high-level State Department delegation traveling to Pakistan in the very near future, Secretary of State Powell says, to continue working with the Pakistani government, which right now is considered among the chief new allies in this broadening coalition. As the president said a few moments ago, there are many nations that only a year or two ago would have been inconceivable allies in any sort of global effort against terrorism, but now, at least in the case of Pakistan, some are coming into the fold.
Indeed, Major. Pakistan, of course, has a lot to lose here. They have a lot at stake domestically and with other Islamic nations that support Pakistan in many ways. You mentioned what the White House might be prepared to do for them. In the broader sense, is the White House prepared to deal on a large scale with any number of countries they might be asking for help? Pakistan's just one. The Russians aren't happy with missile defence, but the US is going to need their help. Could this be months of wheeling and dealing in a way?
Months, probably not months. I think the wheeling and dealing, as you describe it, and of course the diplomat might just say that's regular negotiations, will be happening on an hour-by-hour basis. You mentioned Russia. Clearly, Russia geographically crucial. It's crucial because it holds a veto vote on the UN Security Council, through which some type of resolution might in fact be sought by the Bush administration, giving it global sanction to carry out a military effort against Afghanistan or others. Russia clearly has issues of its own concern. Terrorism has been a huge problem in Moscow, some of it, most of it from Chechen rebels. Chechen rebels have been at times linked with Osama bin Laden, so Russia has its own agenda to pursue here, one that is now diplomatically and security-wise simpatico with the United States, so you might find an allegiance there born of the shared problem with terrorism, and that would sort of put aside other long-running disputes between the two countries.
It's going to be interesting the days ahead. Major Garrett, thanks very much. Colleen.
Michael, after the longest halt since World War I, traders will be returning later today to the New York Stock Exchange. In fact, just a short time from now, trading is scheduled to begin in just about 7 hours from now. And it is an opening session that I think it's fair to say will be watched around the world. The traders, though, will not be alone. Lots of people returning to their jobs in Lower Manhattan on Monday. Bruce Francis has some of their stories.
Nick Liberatos usually serves up hundreds of breakfasts at this coffee shop just 3 blocks away from the NYSE. But as the traders he caters to get back to work, he and his employees will be cleaning up $20,000 worth of rotting food.
I don't know when I can have supplies delivered to the store, like milk, bread, produce. Nobody can come in. So we don't know what to do, and we don't know when we could open.
Although much of the financial district is open to a surprising amount of foot traffic, security is tight in the immediate vicinity of the exchange.
That's my two-wall building pass, but here's my driver's license.
The New York Stock Exchange continued its second day of testing. Several firms, including the nation's largest broker, Merrill Lynch, have had to relocate to buildings outside of the financial district. The NYSE says that computer and communications inside the exchange are working fine, as are key links between members. The neighborhood's workers are hanging tough.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared, but I'm certain that we'll get through.
America is strong and we will do the best. I'm 100% for that.
I'm confident. I'm not afraid.
Wall Street's reopening will also be a major test for the city's transportation systems. Subways will be open, but key lines will be moving much more slowly.
The Holland Tunnel and major Hudson River crossing is still closed, and so are major commuter trains from New Jersey, which used to stop at the World Trade Center. Bruce Francis, CNN Financial News, New York.
Well, European and Asian markets have been struggling along this past week without really any guidance from the New York markets because, of course, they have been closed. Richard Quest joins us now from London with more on what is expected. Richard, this is going to be watched so closely. What are people going to be looking for?
They're going to be looking for direction, Colleen. Of that there is no doubt. You're right that Europe's markets will begin opening at the top of the hour, and we'll see then if they can begin to recover from the very large losses that they saw on Friday, when the main indices in London, Paris and Frankfurt all fell by between 3 and 6%. Investors are especially curious to see what will happen when New York opens. The exchange's chairman says it's important to get it running to send a message.
We are ready to go 9:30 tomorrow morning, and the best way of communicating to these criminals that they've been unsuccessful is for us to ring that bell and be back in business, and we intend to do that.
Now, let's check in what happened to the Asian market. Once again, it's a simple case of, without any New York trading, which way was the market supposed to move? So looking at the numbers, there have been sharp losses overnight in all the major Asian markets. Tokyo's benchmark index, the Nikkei, down about 5% on the session. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng is down 3%. In Singapore, the Straits Times was off 5.1%. They had all been worried about what they now believe is the weakness in large parts of corporate America. The problem is that the effects of what happened on Tuesday will be felt wide and far. For instance, we already know that the airline industry, many airlines are saying that they're in deep financial problems. Others claim that there could be bankruptcies. There will be profit warnings from a variety of other corporations. Insurance companies say they are going to have serious losses. And, of course, there will be severe slowdowns as a result of 4,000 planes per day, many of whom have not been flying. The losses to the airline industry, around $250 million a day. As business prepares to resume at the New York markets, part of downtown Manhattan has reopened for the first time since Tuesday's attack. As Chris Huntington reports, New York's financial district seems determined to get back to business as usual.
As utility workers laid the groundwork for restoring power, the New York Stock Exchange unfurled its message to the world. Wall Street will be back in business Monday morning. The debris of terror still covers the financial district, but there is unanimous determination to shake it off.
Monday we're going to try to open and we're going to clean it.
Hopefully back to normal if we can get deliveries, coffee in the morning, donuts, Danish.
We're just trying to clean up first, put everything together, trying to wake up from this nightmare, and that I think we'll get back even better than what we used to do.
The Federal Reserve Bank of New York set a defiant and patriotic tone on Saturday, blaring marching music from a corner of its stone fortress. Businesses in the financial district are now in a war zone. There are security checkpoints throughout the area.
Just let me see that you have credentials for 45 John.
And many streets remain off limits.
The area's now frozen.
Okay. You know how long that's going to be?
Buildings are all unsafe. The buildings on John Street are unsafe.
As of late today, a huge area of the financial district is so damaged that hundreds of businesses will be shut out of their offices indefinitely, including American Express, Merrill Lynch, and Lehman Brothers in the World Financial Center. The partners of Aetna Judicial Services were lucky. They managed to retrieve their files just before authorities put their building off limits.
So business is basically in 5-6 bags that thanks to my partner we were able to grab out of the office. We're up and running better than probably most businesses today.
The priority tonight on Wall Street is to restore power and communications. More than 9,300 customers are still without electricity in the area, and the regional phone company Verizon reports that it is still working on the connection between the New York Stock Exchange and its member firms. Chris Huntington, CNN Financial News, New York.
So, stock exchanges in New York reopen. Europe and the rest of the world get some financial direction. I'm joined by Bill Hahn, the International Managing Director of ACI, the Financial Markets Association. We have to start with, obviously, the question, New York opens, what happens?
Well, I think it's going to be more of a symbolic opening than an actual opening today. I think volumes are likely to be less than some analysts are forecasting. This isn't the climate, I think, for mature, sensible investors to rush into investment decisions. There are just too many uncertainties, and I think there's going to be a wait-and-see attitude on behalf of many of the fund managers.
You pay your money, you take your choice in terms of the extent of the downside, anything from 250 to 450 points. Perhaps what we see at the open is not as important, other than in confidence terms, than what we see as a trend moving forward.
I think that's correct. I mean, my own personal view is that we're likely to see between 300 to 400 point fall at the opening, and it'll probably close a lot better than that. I think you've got to keep in mind that a lot of companies are still in the process of moving to disaster recovery sites, so they're not going to have the full staff in place to be able to cope with large volumes today. Large numbers of US corporations
have said they're going to buy back shares. Why are they doing it? Is this a sending a message? Is it a confidence-building exercise?
Well, I guess to a certain extent it is. A lot of companies did have share purchase plans that they could activate. If prices fall dramatically, I guess this is a good opportunity for them to buy back shares at a good level.
All right. Warren Buffett, the sage of Omaha, says he won't be selling, and if prices look particularly cheap, he'll be a buyer.
I mean, I think before the disastrous effects of last week, a lot of investors, professional investors, were feeling that the market had reached an attractive level. I mean, they're buying not for what's going to happen for the next 2 to 3 weeks, but for the longer term.
With that in mind, all right, you're a small investor with a portfolio. The last thing perhaps you want to do into this market is sell into it.
I would agree. I think there are probably too many uncertainties at the moment. Nobody knows how this situation is going to pan out over the coming weeks. And I think probably today is not a good day to make longer-term investment decisions.
OK, finally, confidence and mood. You've got your finger on the financial pulse. What's the confidence and mood?
Well, obviously, we represent 19,000 plus individual members of our association around the world in over 80 countries. We're obviously very concerned about them. The mood is extremely cautious.
Bill, many thanks indeed. We wish you luck in the day ahead. Now back to Michael in Atlanta.